Welcome back to Walk Wild. In this episode, I'm going to give you a 10-minute highlight of our 3-month road trip in Canada. To bring the story back to the beginning, this was the first part of our adventure along the Pan American Highway, otherwise known as the longest road in the world. Along with my best friend James, we spent 2 years planning to drive from the top of the Canadian Arctic to the bottom of South America in Ushuaia. This was a huge trip that was going to last us a year, maybe even 2 years. We didn't know. All we knew is that we were going to head out to Canada, buy a van, start driving, and just see how the adventure goes. So, to begin with, in September, we flew out to Canada. But, of course, before things could really get started, COVID got in the way. James flew out 2 weeks before me after I got a positive COVID test. Nightmare. Luckily, after a few days of him hiking around Squamish, enjoying Vancouver and just basically getting ready for the trip, I flew out to join him. And we were ecstatic.
Matt's coming today. Matt's coming! Good to see you. Good to see you. Come on, let's get out. Yeah, it's rock and roll. This way, this way.
The trip finally started with a first setback. We put it behind us, got ready to explore, and just enjoyed a few days hanging around Vancouver, cycling around, and just reveling in the fact that our adventure was about to begin. But we couldn't get too ahead of ourselves. We actually didn't have a van yet, and that was the most important factor for this journey. So we began our search. Unfortunately, what we didn't realise is that getting a van in Canada can actually be pretty difficult.
What is this, 20 hours worth of phone calls? No, nearly 24. 24?
We headed over to Alberta in search of what we thought was a great van, but we realised that bureaucracy was going to stop us getting a van. In Alberta, if you're a foreigner, you basically can't get a van taxed and registered there. Who knew? Certainly not us. So, irritated, wasted money on motels and buses, we decided to turn and head back to BC, which was apparently a lot more friendly to buy vans. That was just around the time we got a call from a lovely man named Cal and his wife Debbie.
What I'm not certain of is if the insurance may have just recently expired on it.
They offered to pick us up, drive us out to their home in the country, and show us this beautiful camper van they had.
What's happening today, my friend?
Well, hopefully we're getting a van. A couple days later, we were out there and we saw, standing in this desert in front of us, our new home. It was perfect. A 1993 Chevrolet G20 cargo van, bright red in colour, full of character, old, kind of bad, but just what we were looking for. So we spent a couple days celebrating with them, handed over the money, $4,900, got the van taxed, insured, and ready for the road. And then we set off. Say Kamloops! Kamloops! Our first destination, north. We couldn't really start the trip without reaching the top of the Canadian Arctic first, and we were in a race against winter. By this time it was October, and the weather was getting colder, more snowy, and more dangerous. But we didn't mind. We were heading up through British Columbia as fast as we could. We had some really interesting experiences with a crowd of hunters who had strung up some moose by the lakeside. James got given a pike which he cut up and cooked in the bitterly cold wind, and I stood there grumbling on the side, as usual for me. After that we headed up to Layard Hot Springs, where we got to wash for the first time in a week, which was beautiful, and we loved swimming around in the wilderness. And we then crossed over into the Yukon, which was our first experience in the true wilderness. It was amazing up there. But we're to stop off in Whitehorse first, which is the capital of the Yukon, the Great White North, to stock up on our winter gear. This was a problem for us because we just did not have the van prepared for cold winter. It wasn't properly insulated. None of this is properly insulated, and we had to buy sleeping bags, heaters, emergency breakdown things. We basically had no idea what we were doing, but we were enthusiastic, so we thought let's go with it anyway and see what happens. Next stop was further north in Dawson City, the gold prospecting town and home of the Klondike Gold Rush. The town is an incredible place with all these old wooden buildings and a really strange vibe to it, like a Wild West. And there's even a place that sells a cocktail that has a human toe in it, frozen off from an old hunter. Of course, we had to have a shot of that. It's a good hell. The next day, with a terrible hangover, presumably from the alcohol the toes kept in, we headed off to the Dempster Highway, which was going to take us right to the Arctic Circle. It was around this point, right on the verge of committing to the Arctic, we realised we don't know how to use snow chains, we don't know how to use a car jack, is our tyre even working on the back, and do we have any signal if anything goes wrong to call anyone? The answer to all of these was a resounding no. But we didn't let that stop us. We decided, hey, this is what adventures are about, let's just commit to this anyway. May have been foolhardy, but we did it anyway. So, we crossed up through Tombstone National Park, we entered the bumpy road, and then eventually the landscape just smoothed out all around us. Snow, ice as far as the eye could see, wilderness. It was spectacular. We drove up to Eagle Plains, which was the first place we spent the night, 30 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. The next day, the weather turned. The inside of the van was frozen, snow had come down on the road, and everything was a lot more cold and a lot more scary. We didn't let that put us off. We drove creeping those last 30 kilometers, one time skidding pretty badly, before arriving at the Arctic Circle. We'd done it. We made it to the top. This was the pinnacle of our trip up to this point, and from here on out we could turn and drive all the way south. It was an amazing moment and one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Walk Wild is going on the Pan American Highway, baby! Woo! After that, we headed south back down the Dempster Highway, nearly crashing into a lorry that had slid right across the road, reminding us of how dangerous it was in this area. Arriving back in Dawson City, we decided we couldn't leave without doing a bit of gold prospecting ourselves, so we waded into a bitterly cold, icy stream to dig for some gold. Unfortunately, we were left wanting. Woo! Keep going! Keep going! Next, we headed across to Kluane National Park, which is right on the frontier with Alaska. It's this huge national park with some of the biggest mountains in Canada in it. It was some of the most amazing hikes I've ever been on, with panoramas for miles, just pure wilderness, grizzly bear tracks, we saw lynxes, we camped by a frozen river. It was a real experience. But we had to tear ourselves away and keep heading south. We passed through the world's smallest desert in Carcross and entered back into British Columbia. Here we went for a swim in an ice lake, where James got a horrible fever as he was already ill. He jumped in the ice lake with me and got even worse over the next few days, but all worth it for a dip in the cold. Jesus Christ! That's breath gone. After that, we drove a different route down through British Columbia to the Rocky Mountains, where we entered Jasper. For the next couple of weeks, we were going to be hiking all over the national parks of Canada. Jasper was amazing, our favourite national park of the trip so far. We loved hiking around Molina Lake, where we saw a wild moose right up close with its calf. We also explored the woodland around there, went for a night hike in Jasper in bitterly cold weather, and we also had our coldest night of the trip around Jasper. Minus 17 degrees. It was so cold that we actually had to turn on the engine in the middle of the night, drive around in circles to stop the van from freezing. Exciting, but a bit scary. After hiking around the Valley of the Five Lakes and exploring a bit more of the area, we entered the Icefields Parkway, a very dangerous highway that links Jasper and Banff, but it was mesmeric in its beauty. We arrived in Banff, went for a huge hike around Lake Louise up to the glacier, where we saw our first avalanche of the trip, and probably the first avalanche of my life. After Lake Louise, we explored a bit more of the national parks around there. We went to Kootenay, we went to Yoho, we did the Stanley Glacier hike where we were in knee-high snow. Really scary, but also exciting. By that point we were sort of thrill seekers and enjoyed the dangerous parts of the hikes. We went to Johnson Canyon and the Ink Pots and just generally hiked our socks off. It was a great couple of weeks. After all this excitement, it was time to head back to Kamloops to reunite with Cal and Debbie after 6 weeks apart. We spent a few days catching up and having a great time, watching TV, eating, and just relaxing really after that long on the road. Unfortunately, just before we were about to leave, the storm of the century hit British Columbia. An atmospheric river smashed into British Columbia and knocked out all 4 of the roads that were meant to link us to Vancouver. We were trapped. We didn't know what to do, so day after day went by. Cal and Debbie were lovely letting us stay there. We spent time chopping wood, doing a bit of cooking for them. We helped them build a shed for their wood, and we just generally tried to keep busy, cleaning the van, building some more shelves in here, and James even painted a map on the side for us to show the Pan American Highway route. After 2 weeks, we decided we had to give it a go. One of the roads was open up to essential travel, and that was the road we decided to take. Luckily for us, Chile is technically registered in Vancouver. By the way, the name Chile is for this van. We chose it because she's bright red in colour, like a chili pepper, and because we're always freezing cold inside it, so we're chilly. Made sense. With her documentation all in order, we managed to get through the roadblocks, which we weren't too proud of, but it worked in this instance. We arrived in Vancouver, had a great night with James's stepbrother and his girlfriend, but the next day, things went bad. We just went out onto the street and our car, the van, was gone. We're in Vancouver and I can't even really get my words out, I'm just so shocked. The van was gone in the morning. We couldn't believe it. Had it been stolen? Was the trip over? We certainly couldn't afford another van if it was. After a couple hours of horror, we found out it had actually been towed for being parked too close to a fire hydrant. Some relief, but not much, as to be honest, we knew we'd still have to pay to get it out. This was one of the worst days of the trip so far.
I just want to cry my eyes out. It's not even funny. It's like, I just thought the whole trip was over. I was imagining having to go back to England.
After driving around Vancouver, we finally paid bail for Chile, got her out of jail, and got the hell out of Vancouver after a bad couple days there. Our last stop in Canada was Vancouver Island, so we hopped on the ferry over to Vancouver Island, and of course, were hit with more storms. We also got the news that the Omicron variant of COVID was spreading around the world. What this meant to us was that maybe the US would close their borders, a nightmare for the start of our trip.
Looking at the Homeland Security website, it looks like we won't need to take a PCR test to get into the US via seaport.
We decided to cut the Vancouver Island trip short and just do a real quick 5 days around the main parts of the coast. So, we headed up through Souk, went for some more really ridiculous hikes in the rain, in the water, one that was a night hike which nearly got us lost and stranded in the wild. Exciting, but pretty damn scary. It was pretty sketchy in there. I mean, that might have been one of the most dangerous hikes I've ever done. After that, we headed up to Usulet and to Tofino, this really wild, rugged section of the Pacific coast. There, we explored some of the surfing beaches, went hiking, and even went for a freezing cold December day swim to round off our 3 months in Canada. What a whirlwind it had been. Exciting, scary, dangerous, certainly adventurous. But the adventure was only just starting. We had a long way to go, thousands of miles ahead of us, and a lot more of the Pan American Highway to explore. So, to make sure you're along for the ride, please like and subscribe. You can check out the other episodes from this series on my YouTube channel, and make sure you follow along, because this is going to be the adventure of a lifetime. Thank you guys, and see you next time.